If you see kidnapping, you see headsmen, you see
overpowered
Yes.
and retrieved the knife,
Yes.
there was no further need to stab it.
Yes, but
Right.
that is not accurate. I don't.
In 1996, there was nothing like Boko Haram. But there were several people that Satan put to sleep that made it possible for him to plant Boko Haram in our territory. The texture, the publicity about our nation changed utterly the moment that the seed of insecurity was planted successfully in the land. Even our police headquarters was challenged.
But Sunday Jackson, a former student in his early 30s, is facing death by hanging after Nigeria's Supreme Court today upheld the judgment of a lower court in Adamawa State. Mr. Jackson was a student turned farmer who says he was violently attacked on his farm in Kodomti Forest in the Newman local government area in Adamawa State by a Fulani herdsman known as Buba Bawuro. The herdsman had strayed into Mr. Jackson's farm with his animals, and after Mr. Jackson challenged him, he apparently pulled a knife and a fight ensued. He stabbed Mr. Jackson a couple of times, but he managed to retrieve the knife and to stab his attacker in the neck, whereupon he died. Mr. Jackson was arrested and charged with murder. He's consistently argued that it was self-defense. In 2021, he was found guilty by a court in Yola and condemned to death by hanging. And today, the Supreme Court in Abuja upheld that judgment. So he's now in a race for his life, and the only option left is to appeal for clemency from the governor of Adamawa State. So what hope does he now have of a reprieve? Well, from on this case, I'm joined now in the studio by a member of his defense team, the US-based human rights lawyer, Emmanuel Ogebe, and by Dr. William Terence Devlin, an American human rights leader who has been supporting Mr. Jackson. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming in. Let me start with you, Emmanuel. Just briefly give us the background to this case and what led to Sunday Jackson ending up on death row.
Yes, so this is really a sad day, I think, for Nigerians and their rights to self-defense. Nigerians already have to provide their own security, electricity, infrastructure, and now they can't even defend themselves without being sentenced to death. And I think all of us should be very alarmed by this very unfortunate precedent. In February of 2021, we read in the news about Jackson's death sentence just as we're coming into Nigeria. So we flew to Yola and I met with his counsel. He was so poor that it was legal aid counsel that helped him. And so I looked through a copy of the judgment, and on the spot, in that initial review, I saw that there was a 167-day lapse between the close of arguments and the judgment. Now, our constitution specifically says it has to be within 90 days. Now, the legal aid counsel hadn't even found it. That shows you the quality of representation that he had or lack thereof. So Mr. Jackson has been failed at every possible level by the system. And
But couldn't you adduce that argument at the Supreme Court?
Well, so here's the thing. So I was initially working with the legal aid counsel to prepare an appeal. I traveled back to the US. When I came back, his counsel had changed. And so a group that I'm affiliated with had taken over, and I knew the chap with that. So I reached out to him and drew his attention to this fact. And he also had marshaled other facts and, threw them all in. But the sad thing is, despite everything, and the case is so clear because this man retrieved the knife of his attacker. So it wasn't his own knife. But one thing that really stands out to me is, I was talking to my dentist today about this, and a dentist said to me, what happened to the charge of manslaughter? Because at the very worst, if he had to be charged with something, it would be manslaughter. He did not know that chap before that day. He couldn't have premeditated this. And I believe that this is one of those cases that when it was brought by the police to the DPP, the Director of Public Prosecution, the DPP's advice should have killed this case. This man has no case to answer. And now he's sentenced to death. He's exhausted all legal channels and he's awaiting execution.
How did you get involved in this case?
Yeah, well, Barrister Emmanuel and I have been working for a number of years here in Nigeria on human rights issues, and this is a sad day, Charles, for human rights in Nigeria. Sunday Jackson, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm a human rights advocate. Sunday Jackson, by anyone's estimation, is totally innocent. And the issue where this man was out farming, minding his own business, and then the attacker came and a struggle ensued. And of course, this man is going to defend himself. That's why we call it self-defense. And yet today, we were at the Nigerian Supreme Court, and it was very brief. It was only about maybe 2 minutes long. And we just wept at the failure of the Nigerian Supreme Court to say that this man, and they had the opportunity to say this man was totally innocent. We haven't seen all the ins and outs of the decision, but we had the opportunity to meet this humble farmer this young man who unfortunately his wife abandoned him, had been on death row for 10 years. So Sunday Jackson has now become an international case for human rights,
Yes,
and
because
so we're going to continue to advocate.
I was going
for
to
it.
ask you what are the international dimensions of this case?
Well, the international dimensions are Open Doors, which is a human rights organization, has recounted that there have been thousands of killings of Christians by Fulanis. And so as a human rights advocate and as a pastor, I'm here to advocate for this man who is totally innocent. So it has international implications. The eyes of human rights advocates are now on Nigeria. Like, how could this happen? How could this possibly happen? By anyone's estimation, as Barrister said earlier, manslaughter at least, because murder one that he's being convicted of and may face hanging if we can't get clemency for him, it has to be premeditated. So what justice on the Nigerian Supreme Court, that didn't pop up and say to him or her, this is a case of self-defense and this man is totally innocent. So we encourage people to continue to pray for Sunday Jackson and his innocence.
Emmanuel, what was the prosecution's argument? I understand that they urged the court to convict Mr. Jackson solely on his confessional statement and based on the fact that death had occurred. So basically, no mitigating circumstances, and that was pretty much how the judge saw it.
Yes, so part of the problem is they are arguing that he had a responsibility to flee. Now, in the US, we have, stand your ground rules, which means you can defend yourself as much as you.
And even in our own city, it's easy to tell a police station because you're going to find barriers and barricades around the entry points. Because once upon a time, something that was not was successfully planted in the territory, and it has changed the way we live. But not.
We're going to be with Sunday Jackson until the final lap of this, and we are hoping.
All right, guys, let's keep on praying for Alex Sunday Jackson and hope that this young man does not die unjustly.
Well, thank you for bringing
Don't
that
forget
to
to
us.
subscribe,
We're
like,
very encouraged
and
by
share
that.
this video to your
Both of you.
loved
Keep
ones.
doing it.
Let's keep on advocating
Dr. William
that
Terence Devlin is
the
an
truth
American
is
human
going to
rights leader
prevail
who's been
and the
supporting
gates
Mr.
of
Jackson.
hell
And of course,
will
Emmanuel
not
Ogebe is a
prevail
member
over
of the
our
defense
nation.
team, and he's
Thank
a
you.
US-based human rights lawyer. Thank you very much indeed to both of you.
Thank you.